everyone, so I'm here today with another edition from my A to Z series. This one is about all the books that I have read from A to Z. Well, not all the books, flipping heck, that would be a long video. But I picked one book from each letter of the alphabet, where I can, of books that I have read. There might be favourites, there might be ones I don't like so much, they might be just, you know, ones that I feel like I never talk about, and that's the whole purpose of this new series of mine, to just talk about books that I don't normally get to talk about. So I'm going to kick this one off with the letter A and Am I Normal Yet?, which is a book I read quite recently, so it doesn't totally count for this, but I was stuck a little bit. There were so many A's and a lot of them I didn't want to go for, so I went for this one, which is the first book in the Spinster Club series by Holly Bourne. I gave this one, no, I didn't give this 1 star. I gave this 5 stars, absolutely loved it. It is a YA series that has feminism, friendship, anxiety, and so many other wonderful topics are covered in this. It's such an important book, in my opinion, that everyone should read. And it talks about periods. For the letter B, I have gone for Beauty, which is by Louise Mensch. Now, you probably haven't heard of this one because on Goodreads it's only got 584 ratings. I won this book in a Goodreads giveaway, and it was one of the ones that I actually picked up and read relatively quickly, and I fell in love with it. It was just absolutely fantastic. So it's about a girl named Dina, and it follows her from quite a sort of young teenagey sort of age as she moves into, I think it was New York City, and tries to sort of make her way. So she starts off just waiting on tables, but she wants to get to owning her own business, a successful businesswoman. And this really surprised me, and I want more people to read this book because I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. For the letter C, I have got The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. I had to read this at school, and it really quite surprised me that I ended up enjoying it quite as much as I did, because I wasn't expecting to enjoy it with it being a necessary school read. But I thought it was fantastic. I really want to give it a reread because at this point I don't remember it very well, and I feel like it's a really important book that deserves a reread. So if you've never checked this one out, I definitely highly recommend it, but I can't remember an awful lot about it. For the letter D, I was struggling a little bit, and I ended up picking Destiny Rising by L.J. Smith. I don't know at what point the Vampire Diaries series was ghostwritten from, but I think it was later than this one, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, the Vampire Diaries books. I want to talk about this because I devoured a lot of these. I really enjoyed them, but they aren't fantastic. The first couple are okay, and then they just start going downhill and downhill and downhill, and I have yet to actually even try and finish the series because it was just going so downhill, and I was like, I'm not sure I want to read these anymore. I kind of want to. I've given myself long enough break now, I think, that I want to check them out, but they're hard work. The TV show is way better in this case. For the letter E, I have gone for The End of an Earring by Pam St. Clement. This is an autobiography about a woman who, if you're in the UK, you may have seen a show called EastEnders, and she played a character called Pat Butcher, who was famous for her huge, ridiculous, out there earrings. And I picked this up because it was the first book that I decided to get with my Audible subscription. I wanted something that I thought would be quite easy to get into, and meanwhile I felt like she'd probably got quite an interesting story to tell about her life. So that's why I went for it. I did not expect to come out of it giving it 4 stars. It was really interesting. You followed her whole life, how she got to the point of getting to EastEnders, and also why she left EastEnders. And she's lived an interesting life. She's a really interesting, how many times did I say the word interesting? She's a really insightful person that's really quite eloquent, and also really, her voice was great to just listen to. It was really soothing, and I flew through this. And if you know who she is, or if you're just intrigued anyway, then this might be worth picking up because this was a dark horse for me. The letter F. I've gone for Falling for the Wingman by Krista McHugh. This is the 3rd book in the Kelly Brothers series. Again, you probably won't have heard of this one because it's only got 601 ratings on Goodreads. So this is a adult romance novel, which isn't a genre I tend to pick up very often at all. And so when I read this, I was kind of going in with like kind of weird expectations, like, oh, it's probably gonna be like really crap and tacky, and to some extent it was quite tacky, but I actually enjoyed the story that went along with it, and that is the reason why I picked this one. I was like, I can actually talk about an adult romance novel that deserves recommendations that people might actually pick up that they won't have heard of. So I was really excited to be able to pick this one for the letter F. For the letter G, we have got The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson, and this is the first book in the Millennium series. It's a book I've actually read a few times, and I've watched the films multiple times, and I feel like I haven't ever really properly talked about it on my channel, so I wanted to bring it up. I have read up to the fourth. The fourth one is wrote by someone else because the author actually died before even the first one was published, if I remember correctly. And there was a bit of a hoo-ha because there were notes for it and it was like partially complete, I think, but there was a bit of a hoo-ha between family and people wanting it to get published and people not wanting to get published, so it was a bit of a mess and there was a bit of a gap there, but the fourth one did make it out. I didn't enjoy the fourth, but I listened to it on audiobook and I'm thinking maybe it was just too complex for audio, because these books are really complex and deeply intertwined with like political scandal and crime, and the first one especially is definitely my favourite because there's a real kind of murder mystery whodunit aspect with that one that I loved. But it did take a while to get going. It's very slow and quite difficult to get through the first probably 100 pages, but I say stick with this if you've never given it a try, or just watch the film because the film's actually a lot easier to kind of just get through, even though it's nearly 3 hours long. For the letter H, I have gone for a book that I haven't read for so many years. I read it from the library like probably about 8 years ago and I really want to revisit it. So this is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. And from what I remember, this is historical fiction or maybe contemporary, but with like a historical kind of twist. So this follows a girl from, again, what I remember, it's been a long time, but this follows a girl who's kind of investigating, like, was it Vlad the Impaler? I need to reread this. I wanted to mention it because I loved it and I feel like it doesn't get enough attention and not everyone likes it, but I loved this and I need to give it a reread. 704 pages. For the letter I, I've gone for The Iron Trial by Cassandra Clare and Holly Black, and it's the first book in the Magisterium series. Now obviously Cassandra Clare, and indeed Holly Black for that matter, are authors that are talked about an awful lot on BookTube, especially within the YA community because of all the different Shadowhunter Chronicles books, but I feel like the Magisterium series doesn't get half as much attention, yet it really should, because in some ways I prefer it and I think it's a lot easier to, well, of course it's a lot easier to get through because it's middle grade, so it's a lot shorter, but it's a lot easier to fall in love with the characters and just get involved in the world. Some people compared this to Harry Potter in a bad way, and I think that kind of had a detrimental effect to people picking this series up, but I really enjoy it and I highly recommend it. The letter J, I've got Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, and this one I actually gave 2 stars to. I listened to the audiobook and I'm not sure that I'd have got through it if I'd listened to the physical book, so I don't think the audiobook was a bad thing for me. This just wasn't my cup of tea. I loved the films, even the most recent one. Oh my god, that made me cry so much at the cinema when I went to go and see it. But the book I wasn't quite such a fan of, but this might be the right book for some people. It's just very, very sci-fi heavy. And again, I don't feel like many people talk about this book. Maybe this is why. For the letter K, I've got The Killer on the Wall by Emma Kavanagh. And this one was a real kind of surprise one for me. It's only got 349 ratings, so this needs a boost. But I really enjoyed this. It's quite sort of dark and twisty, and it's just a typical murder mystery with a bit of thriller kind of thrown in there. But it's not known. I picked it up from NetGalley and I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't a bad read by any means. For the letter L, I've got Lawyer for the Dog by Lee Robinson, and this is the first book in the Sally Baynard series, apparently. This has only got 587 ratings on Goodreads, but I loved it. It had the right kind of cozy mystery kind of feeling to it, with the right balance of actually being able to have a dog thrown in. The dog makes a cute addition to the story and makes it a little bit different, a bit quirky. And the fact that you're getting a mystery from the lawyer side of things rather than from like the victim or from the police, it's the lawyer. So I really enjoyed this, and this deserves so much more attention than what it's getting. I gave it 5 stars, and I picked up the second one, which I haven't yet read, which was Lawyer for the Cat or something like that. So this time we get a cat. I need to read that book. For the letter M, I've got another really underrated book here. This is Molly's Millions by Victoria Connolly. I actually picked this up as one of the first Kindle books I bought, and I got it for 99p, and I was just one day thinking, oh, what shall I read next, and just happened to pick this up and fell in love with it in a really surprising way. It's only got 543 ratings, yet it's fantastic. It's about a girl named Molly, and she buys a lottery ticket with like pretty much the last pound that she has. She's really poor, and by complete and utter fluke of a chance, she wins. And it's about what she does with the money and how she goes about giving this money out, because she doesn't want it all for herself. It's a really fun, cute, contemporary read. Next we have the letter N, and I struggled a bit for this one. I ended up picking Night of the Living Dummy, which is the 7th original Goosebumps book by R.L. Stine. It's not one of my favourite Goosebumps books, but it is one that I always can kind of picture in my head really well, because Slappy is such an iconic character. If you've never picked any of these up, there are several, and I don't think it really matters whether you read them in any particular order. If you want to read them all, I'd read them in order, but if you just want to pick up a random one, doesn't matter whether you pick up the first, the second, the third, you'll get thrown into the story anyway. The letter O, I've got Once in a House on Fire by Andrea Ashworth, and this is a memoir that I had to read for school. I don't know what age I was though. Somewhere between 15 and 18. That's always really helpful, isn't it? I can't remember whether I read it for GCSE or for A-level, you see. But this is a memoir about Andrea, who had a really abusive kind of family life when she was growing up. Her parents argued a lot, her dad was very violent, and it's about how her mum deals with that, how she got a sister, I think she's got a younger sister, deal with that too, and it's just heartbreaking because you know it's true, and you know so many people are in this situation and you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. For the letter P, I've got a book that is more well known but the people don't really talk about from what I've seen, and this is Prodigal Summer by Barbara Kingsolver. I read this about 10 years ago. I don't remember much about it at all, so I really want to give it a reread, but I gave it 5 stars, and I just remember it being a bit weird and set in America, but really enjoying it and being pleasantly surprised, and I'd just never heard of it, and I think a friend lent it me or something. And so because I picked this up on a whim, I'm suggesting you pick it up on a whim, you might love it. The letter Q, I definitely struggled, but I managed to find The Queen Bee Strikes Back, which is the second book in the Queen Bee series by Krista McHugh. This is the second time that Krista McHugh is making it onto this list, because she was also the one that was letter F, Falling for the Wingman. So she's done adult romance, but she's also done YA contemporary, and this is the second book in her YA series, and I really enjoyed this whole series. And if you're just looking for something a bit less known, I mean this second book has got 785 ratings, then maybe give it a go. It's a bit fluffy, it's a bit, I wouldn't say you could ever use the word deep for it, for example, but it's really cozy, comfortable, quick, light, just what you need in summer, which is now too late obviously, but just what you need kind of book to just distract you. For letter R, I've got Revival by Stephen King. I picked this because A, I gave it 5 stars, but B, this was the first Stephen King book I ever picked up, and indeed still the only one I've ever picked up actually. And obviously people go on a lot about his horrors, but you never really hear people mentioning this one, and I think that's a bit of an injustice because I really enjoyed this. It seems quite typical from what I've heard of King's writing, in that it's very kind of character driven, not an awful lot happens for ages, it's very unnecessarily long at times, but I felt like that worked in this case and I really enjoyed it and I want to recommend it. For letter S, we have got Sophies World by Justine Garda. And I read this at school, a friend lent it me, it was one of her favourite books, and I remember absolutely loving it. It was my first taste of philosophy, which actually led to me picking philosophy as a minor at university, so I've got this book to thank for that decision. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really different, and I don't remember it well enough. I want to reread it, but again, it's not a book I've ever really mentioned before, so I wanted to throw it out there. For letter T, I've picked The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, and I loved this book. Again, I read this about 8 years ago, around the same time that I read The Historian, but I flew through this. In some ways, my recent reading of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo made me think back to this book, because in some ways they're very similar. It's about someone getting invited to someone's house, like to an old lady's house, to listen to her story of her life, and there's twists and turns towards the end. And I really enjoyed this, and I want to give this a reread too, and that's probably why this one's been on my mind quite a bit recently. The letter U, I went for The Undomesticated Goddess by Sophie Kinsella. This is one of the only choices that I had for the letter U, so I kind of had to just roll with it. But it is one of my favourites. It's not the favourite, but it's up there. I gave this 5 stars because it's a little bit different to our other ones. It's not all set on like romance throughout the thing. It's more about a woman trying to kind of escape life and learn how to do basic things like make a sandwich. Shocker. For the letter V, I've gone for The Vault by Karen Long, and this has only got 311 ratings. This is a book that I picked up on NetGalley years ago and read and reviewed straight away. I gave it 4 stars. This one sticks in my head because I can't remember much about the plot, but I can remember the most gruesome murders in this, and I'm talking gruesome, I'm talking like, the only thing I can remember in my head is something to do with like humans being turned into like, how many times did I say the word like? Humans being turned into kind of living mannequins. Well, they're not living by the time they've been turned into them, but this book made me almost throw up. It was that bad. Like, I could feel the vomit rising up my throat. I can still remember the bit that made me think that, and I was like, oh. This, if you want a gruesome book, you need to check this out. For W, I've gone for one of my favourite classics of all time, and that is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. It's quite a long one, but I wouldn't say it's a difficult one to get into, and I really want to give this a reread as well because I don't remember much about it, but I do remember absolutely loving it. And yeah, from what I remember, it was quite easy to read. And finally, for the letter Y, because I haven't got any Zs, we have got Yes Please by Amy Poehler. This was the first audiobook that I ever managed to actually get through. I didn't listen to this on Audible, I listened to this elsewhere, but it was the first audiobook that I listened to and managed to get through and enjoyed, and got me into the stage I am today, which is listening to audiobooks regularly. So I gave this 5 stars. It was a very popular book back in the day, so you may have already read it, but if you haven't, I highly recommend giving the audiobook a go because it works really well. So that's my A to Z of books that I have read. As I said, there's going to be more videos in this series. I'm going to see how many different ways I can find of doing these A to Zs, but I'm just starting off with the basic, really obvious things for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you did. If you enjoyed it, please also give it a thumbs up. Subscribe by clicking the image of me if you want to see more book reviews and other bookish content from me, and I will see you soon. Bye bye!